Hi, this is Mitch Morgan, longtime radio guy from a bunch of radio stations around the nation. You're listening to the Doug Dahlgren Show on Artist First Radio.
Welcome to another broadcast of the Doug Dahlgren Show on the Artist First Radio Network. All past broadcasts can be downloaded free and on demand. Visit the archive sections at artistfirst.com. And now here's your host, Doug Dahlgren.
And welcome everyone to the program this morning. I am Doug Dahlgren. I'm going to be your host for this next hour. Now, we talk about writers here. We try to introduce them to you. We've got business right now, fun business. Got a new author I want you folks to meet. He brings us a story about the world that we all live in, but too few are fully aware of what's really going on around us. Now, did I just insult you? Answer is no, not by a long shot. You see, the scary thing is that all of this stuff is by design. It's intentional, and this novel helps to expose it. Now, it begins with a simple quote offering some thoughtful math. And I begin quote here. The United States has entered a recession every 6 years since World War II. The average maturity of a high-yield municipal revenue bond is 25 years, and the average public retirement is 30. We're going to ask the author to go into a little more detail and expand on that in a few minutes. But the point is, to entice you further to enjoy this novel, let me boil down a mystery by stating a fact I learned many, many years ago. When you make the rules, the game is easier. With a rich cast of characters in a location that stands in for nearly every municipal area in this country, this book will open your eyes. You'll recognize government expansion that you may be taking for granted. You can't help but learn from this entertaining story, and that's the idea. But do it quick, because the rule makers will be busy adjusting those rules to deal with your newfound knowledge. The book is Blinded Authority. The author, Chad Boles, is here with us. Welcome, Chad. It's good to have you here this morning.
Thanks so much for having me. You nailed it in that description. That's great.
Terrific. And we're going to ask you, usually I hold off on this question till kind of toward the end of an interview, but what I'd like to know right up front is, what is the takeaway that you hope your readers will get from Blinded Authority?
Well, like you mentioned in the introduction, understanding. I don't know. I wrote a story because I wanted people to have understanding, and because it can be a very complicated and boring story, I wanted to create a story that people could engage in and relate to, and then have an understanding of how public finance could and might work in your own hometown, and bring to light the old adage that money is power, and sometimes they go hand in hand. I wanted you to see how those correlations and relationships can and do work in many of the chapters of the book.
Oh, yeah. Public finance, that's two words that make most people stand up and go to the refrigerator and get another beer. Well, listen,
That's right.
Talk about that quote, okay? Tell the folks exactly what you mean by starting this book with that particular quotation.
Sure, and it was, of course, intentional. The United States goes into a recession that's defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP, whether it's negative 2%, negative 10%, or negative 1%. Any 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth or deceleration is defined as a recession. And since World War II, on average, we've had about one about every 7 years. The average high-yield municipal bond maturity is around 25 years, and the average public pension, people retire around 50, live to about 80, so they're about 30 years. The reason I created the quote is I wanted people to understand that you have about 3 chances for a catalyst to occur in financial default in metropolitan municipalities. If a recession is what brings to light the weaknesses of financial management in municipal finance, you see it about 3 times during an average pension or an average high-yield municipal bond.
Let's talk a little bit about your background before we get too deep into this thing, all right?
Okay.
Where are you originally from?
I am from a very small town in North Florida called Milton, Florida, that is the county seat of Santa Rosa County. And I say county seat, with tongue-in-cheek, sort of. We're the biggest town in the county. A lot of agriculture, a lot of outdoor fun, a lot of beach time, a lot of scenic natural beauty, and a lot of do-it-yourselfers, and many might argue the most, they say, physically conservative district in the entire state, and that might be true, but we all tend to believe we're just really more down to earth and, do-it-yourselfers, like I said, and people that I still love being around all the time when I can.
Large family, bunch of siblings, or was it just you?
A lot of cousins. Older brother, grew up on an 80-acre farm, kind of way out in the middle of nowhere, like they say. Dad had a bunch of brothers, Mom had brothers and sisters, and we all had very, very close relationships with our cousins growing up. So, yeah, you could say it was a really large family. We did almost everything together.
And I assume that this area of Milton, Florida, that's where you went to elementary school, high school, all that good stuff?
Born and raised, yeah.
All right. Were you at all interested in writing while you were there in high school?
Not anything more than I was required to do by the teachers. We, like many rural atmospheres, we spent a lot of time playing high school sports and roaming around the outdoors and trying to make A's and, trying to find better halves and doing all those fun things that kids do. But no, I did not. I remember reading some and really enjoying Huckleberry Finn as one of the first novels that I was ever required to read, and then being a little upset when the teacher was trying to get me to understand there was more than just one level to the story. So, but no, I didn't know I had an interest. I was just a kid.
Well, but reading counts. And
it does. Yeah.
Samuel Clemens is a good place to start. So there really wasn't an English teacher that was inspiring you to learn how to write?
No, I was more inspired by math. Probably because a lot of kids, they find their groove that seems to be the easiest, and which is good. I mean, everybody's got a gift, and if you can find it early, that's even better. But I spent most of my time in math-related classes and clubs and that kind of thing.
Okay. Now, where did you go to college?
I went to Auburn University. They had a civil engineering curriculum, or engineering in general, and then I picked civil as I began to get closer to graduation. And from there, did engineering and construction. We built sewer systems for paper mills and chemical plants and landfills and, chicken rendering plants. It was not sexy work, but it was certainly, good work, and I learned a lot. And ambition being the better half of envy, as I was doing that for about 10 years, I decided that I wanted to maybe expand and broaden my horizons, and so I got an MBA for no other reason than I was just still interested in academic learning. I had some curiosity about what else was out there, and went to Georgia State in the executive MBA program.
What was it in the environmental field of civil engineering? Something had to have caught your eye.
That's an interesting question. I think it's because of the pristine beauty that I grew up around. And then, like many of us, read the newspaper articles and read, the growing environmental conservation effort that was happening in the 80s, the RECRA laws, the Environmental Defense Fund, and saw, or at least perceived, a need to in some way try to help. And I was already mathematically inclined, and civil engineering is the one engineering curriculum that deals mostly with water, which is what most of environmental conservation is about, usually is water. And so it was almost a natural fit. It was either that or electrical engineering, and there's no way I could have gotten out of that. Like they say, is it hard to get into Auburn? It's a lot harder to get out.
That's for sure. Now, your curiosity about our financial world, you had to have that to start with. But that's really led you into some deep concepts, the complicated stuff about bonds and pensions and sewers, the things that make people yawn and try to get away from you. But, how did you become such a quick study on all this stuff?
The mathematical part of engineering, it's mathematical, but it's more searching for answers using analytics, right? And so when I got into the MBA program and got through the first year of kind of the basics of debits and credits and financial statements and the way the actual structure works, the second year you spend most of your time learning how to extrapolate information from it. And so many people, gifted people in the business world and in my world, can read financial statements and without even picking up a calculator begin to tell you the missions and the strategies of the company, because like the Bible says, if you want to follow your love, follow your treasure. And so where you follow the treasure, you can find out what an entity or a culture's strategy is. It doesn't have to be nefarious. You don't have to go into it with some kind of suspicion, but you can simply read where the money is being spent in any entity that's required to create a financial statement, and you can tell what strategy is. It's simply there. Votes and board meeting votes and council votes are simply directives to spend money. And so when you see where the money is going, you can tell exactly what the mission is. And I got that training from the MBA program, and then doing what I do as a financial advisor, I'm watching many different markets and financial statements all the time. And we try to pick out different correlations and relationships that exist that don't seem to be quite so obvious. And so I guess I'm naturally curious anyway, and having that ability to see what a bond is being spent on or why a company is selling stock.
You've been involved in this in the financial world really since 2001. When did you realize that you really wanted to sit down and write a book about this fascinating world that you'd become a part of?
I'd been yammering about it for 2 or 3 years as I began to see, our own counties, failings and challenges. And we're down in spring vacation in April of 2016, and my brother-in-law just looked at me on a bike ride, and he said, "Why don't you just write a book?" And it was like a hammer. I said, "Oh, why don't I write a book?" So I guess that ignorance or that lack of any kind of fear, because I'd never written a book, and heaven help me if anybody ever read it. So I sat down and I started writing a book, and I just, the way I did it was I said, okay, well, what would be a really good movie? And my favorite movie opening is how I opened the first chapter, and I just went from there.
Well, that leads to the next question. Normally somebody writing about the financial world is going to put everybody to sleep with a big documentary and a lesson plan and all this, but you decided to put this in the form of a novel. And by that, I mean you're telling a fictional story, folks. He's really got a story you can get involved in here and enjoy. How did you decide that was the best way to convey your message?
A couple of ways. First of all, I had been writing about it for about 2 years, just short little articles, and it didn't seem to resonate quite the way that I wanted it to resonate. And it's kind of funny how I got there. So I'm telling a couple of buddies in the office, I'm like, hey, I'm writing a book on municipal finance. To a person, every single, they didn't even look up from their monitors. Has it got drugs and sex in it? I'm like, well, no, it's not that kind of book. And, well, I'm not reading it. Got too many other things to do. So I said, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. And the editor, as you know, hey, everybody needs a good editor, and I certainly more than most. And she began to question me in the very beginning. She asked me, she said, do you really think this should be fiction? This is some really, really complicated stuff. And she said, and pardon my French, she said, I'm already pissed off from reading the first 10 chapters. I said, well, I've tried it for 2 years, and there's one thing I couldn't be more sure of. This needs to be a fictional book so that you can create some color around this very real world that exists. And I just went from there, and I had so much fun. Fiction, of course, just opens the boundaries to whatever you want to write.
Absolutely. Now, whether it be a technical journal or a fictional novel, you have to have your background in this. Obviously, you have tremendous experience in this area. Besides that, what other research did you do to prepare to write this book?
Everything that happens in the book is basically a string of headlines connected by hyperbole. It's just really good hyperbole. Everything in the book has already happened. It's happened all over the country. If you were to Google any of the financial structures that I mention, or any of the defaults that I mention, or any of, the instances that happen in the book, almost all of them come from an area in our country, and it's already happened.
Now, the other writers that are listening to us, they all understand there's three main components to a book. You have to have a story, you have to have characters, and you have to have a location. Now, I assume that the story came to you first. What was next? Did you pick a location, or did you start developing characters?
See, I learned something about this book writing world every day. I did not know that, but of course it makes perfect sense. And the way that you asked that question is even better. So I picked this, the story came to me first. The location I picked almost immediately because I wanted to pick a location that did not have a professional football team or a professional baseball team, but was still a large metropolitan city. I spent some time in Florida in my 20s working as an engineer, and so I had some familiarity with Orlando and Tampa, so Orlando got the call.
All right. Now, the characters that you came up with, are these drawn from people that you know, people you've worked with?
No, all the characters are really me. We're all a result of our experiences, and I would be naive to think that the characters that I've created didn't come from some understanding of somebody else I knew. But I tried to depict a group of interesting characters that exist in every city council and every development authority and every school system across our country that people could recognize. And then the fun part is giving them a personality that maybe matches their mission in the book, and maybe it doesn't. Humanness is such a unique thing, and you can come from whatever perception you want.
Who would you say is your protagonist? You've got a whole cast of characters here.
The protagonist might not even exist in the book. The protagonist might be the reader. And I've never thought about that until you just asked me that question. I tried to write a story that is happening every day, yet because of intentional language and structure, it's very confusing. My protagonist, at best, would be one of the characters who is curious enough to understand what is happening around them and assign a value of risk to the actions that are being taken that currently have no value of risk. And that might be a squirrely answer, but...
No, it kind of leads into the next question I had set up, which was supposed to really trap you in a corner here, but I was going to ask you, are there any good guys in this novel?
Good guys, bad guys. They're all people.
Perspective.
Right, so it certainly does. It will depend on the reader's perspective and what the reader has in mind as an idea for what government should be and what capitalism should look like and how much intrusion into capitalism should occur by the government. Again, you'd be naive to not know without a fact that is already occurring, and capitalism has been government subsidized since at least the early 1800s.
Let's move to this. The characters that are in this novel are very realistic. You've done a good job fleshing them out, as we say. Tell us a little bit about them. There's several that come to mind that are repetitious throughout the story and kind of lead the reader through. Who are they, and what do they mean to you?
So you've got a sheriff that is doing the hardest work that he knows how to do. His priority is obviously protecting and serving the people, yet his competency of finance limits his ability to control his future. You've got a third-term county commissioner who sees his political power as the ability to enrich himself for only himself. You see a billionaire who even the billionaire does not understand or does not comprehend the risk being taken with the deals that she's been involved in with the very same government that I have created as an antagonist. But she learns, her knowledge evolves through the book. And then you got the gumshoe reporter who's a good guy who understands a little bit of all of it and has the courage to continue to put it in the paper and speak his mind. They say don't fight City Hall. It can be very, very intimidating to be a single individual constituent and try to voice your opinion for what you know is at least worthy of discussion. And so you got that guy in there. You got an ambitious district attorney who understands the structure, has already built in her opinion about the structure of finance, but is intent on executing the rule of law wherever that occurs. And finance, it's not her priority. Defending, the legal framework that's been set up is her priority. She just happens to be in a place where she can understand the other side, but is relegated to her own side until she's able to provide a gift near the end. You've got a governor who is politically savvy as the best of them. You've got a real fun billionaire Italian race car manufacturer who comes onto the scene later on.
Touching all the bases here. And again, folks, The book is Blinded Authority. It is about the financial world and kingdoms that we see on TV as we get up and go get that next beer during the news break. But these things are important. And Chad Boles is our guest today. He's taken this world and turned it into a novel that you'll really enjoy reading. And all these concepts that he's describing are things that are important to us and we need to know about. Again, like I said, we're here with Chad Boles this morning. The book is Blinded Authority. Now, Chad, we want to get back right away here to Blinded Authority. There are scenarios that you describe in this book that are very familiar to all of us. Now, we hear the ones about them on the news just every day. Failing infrastructures, underpaid first responders, pensions underfunded, and all of this seems to fly in the face of the high taxation that we're all experiencing. Where is the money going?
That's a great question. For the first responders, it's one of the reasons I wrote the book. I want people to see, the mechanics of the guarantees that have been made to them. So where does the money go? You could argue that almost every metropolitan balance sheet spends 25 to 30% of their money on retiree pensions, some as high as 50, and most, if not all, are underfunded. Some of them woefully underfunded. The other place where money seems to drift away are tax abatements. You'll find that many counties, especially metropolitan counties, are the largest landowners in their county in order to give a tax abatement. If a government owns property, then it can't be property taxed. And so governments in sale-leaseback transactions give tax abatements. For example, I cannot think of one stadium. There could be one, maybe the Packers. I've heard the Jerry Jones Stadium in Dallas, but there is not one other professional stadium that I can think of, could be wrong, that the pro team actually owns. In almost all of those cases, your local development authority owns that stadium, and they lease it to the professional team that uses it. So where does the property tax abatement given away to the team or the developer or the entity that uses these kinds of tax abatements, where would that money have gone? Well, in most cases, at least 2/3 of it would have gone to your local school system, who is already spending 25 to 35% of their dollars on existing retired teachers. Same with firefighters and same with police officers. The interesting thing about giving away a tax abatement is one municipality can act on the authority of any other municipality within that taxable area. if a city abates taxes of a professional team to build a development facility that's just a basketball gym, they abate the taxes of the county and the school system where that basketball gym will reside, or a basketball or football stadium or a baseball stadium. You know, many you talk about crony capitalism. If money is power, and a development authority's ability to lend money like a bank without any votes, you have immediately eliminated the concept of conflict of interest.
Well, I was just going to say that one of the good guys that you mentioned in here is Jim Pinson. He's your reporter.
Right.
Is the media complicit in this that you've been explaining?
To say the media was complicit would be to recognize the media as something more than a business. So in my opinion, the media is a business, and every story you read, whether it's in the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post or the AJC, is simply someone's opinion. And it is a business for them to sell papers, so they must sell papers and content that people want to read. Not many people want to read about tax abatements and development authorities, although the AJC does a great job of reporting on development authorities in Cobb County and Fulton County and DeKalb County and the city of Brookhaven and city of Atlanta. They do a pretty good job, reporting on some of their activities, but by law, development authorities are not required to comply with Freedom of Information request. You can send them an open records request, and they don't have to comply with it at all.
All right. Now, you mentioned a sports stadium, and those are all over the place, and there's always the deals, and it seems like the owners of a sports team want a new stadium every 4 or 5 years.
It's about every 20.
I was exaggerating
to
some degree.
Matures.
Okay, very good. Public transportation is a main player in this story as well. It seems that it's always underused and wanting more public funding to expand. Now, why is that? Why is an underused asset always trying to expand?
I explain my answer in the book. The mass transit directors around the country will have to answer that for themselves. The book tried to give a different perspective than the constant pablum we hear about centralized transportation and how efficient and effective it can be if only we'd use it. You can get the records from at least our local mass transit system and find that most years since 2002, ridership has been declining. Many of the locations of the hubs and the nodes are in politically favorable places, and it's a heavy rail system, so once it's in place, you can't change it. And because a heavy rail is the most expensive part of any mass transit system, it's hard to adjust and play the trends outside of that huge investment in capital. So all of the property on a mass transit system is a government-owned property, so they pay no property taxes. So to put a real estate investment along the nodes in order to generate more profit would seem like an easy thing to do. The entity building the high-density developments along a mass transportation node would have to pay no property taxes. They get a loan from the local development authority, never have to talk to a bank or explain why a non-profitable system will continue to work when they can simply go and get the money for expansion from a local municipal development authority.
And you can find it wherever you want to look today. I mean, it's eye-opening now. You see a new multi-family housing project going up right alongside Rapid Rail.
Transit-oriented development.
There you go.
I heard a guy one time say traffic-oriented disaster.
Well, now, the interesting thing, though, Chad, is that the decisions and the maneuvering go on pretty much right out in public, but they are so little understood by that public that this stuff could really literally be considered hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, absolutely. Most people point to the Puerto Rican Development Bank as the reason for the Puerto Rican default. They can't file for bankruptcy. They tried to become a state so that they could file for bankruptcy, but all the fingers point to the Puerto Rican Development Bank. And the same goes for the city of Detroit, who filed for bankruptcy several years back. It's legal. The things that the machinations that occur are legal. And if they're not legal, the individual constituent has to raise his own money and take City Hall or the county to court where they have their own bought and paid for attorneys. So even if it's not legal, to move forward with the financial mechanisms that they do would require strong resistance from anybody in the constituency that wanted to challenge it. Otherwise, it just occurs.
Did you consider the risks involved in exposing these tactics in a book with this much detail?
Which risk?
Where I'm going from the public standpoint. See, you can do anything you want as long as the boss is asleep. And we are the boss. And if we're unaware or asleep at the wheel, these guys can do whatever they want. This book is exposing that. It's telling us what's going on. There's got to be an inherent risk to doing that.
Yeah. It calculates, but it never registers above what I would consider reward. And reward being, you know what? It's a free country. I can write a book if I want to. I can write a truthful book if I want to. If people understand it, great. But risk, I guess, is in the eye of the beholder, and I don't find much risk in writing what I think is a really, really fun book that's got a lot of great information. And if you've ever called a police officer, flushed your toilet, or got a clean drink of water and appreciated it, this book's for you, because those things, they are at risk with the kind of public finance that goes on now. I don't know if you've ever read any Nassim Taleb, who wrote Black Swan and Anti-Fragile, but when people say, well, none of these things could happen, Chad, these things, they just don't occur as often as you're making them up. The domesticated turkey, he's got a lot of friends, he gets fed, he's got free housing, he's got free health care every day of his life, until the last one.
Until the last one.
And so that's
who's counting. That's the thing. Who's doing the counting?
Right.
We've gotten so wrapped up in talking about this. This is such an interesting subject, and we do want the readers to pay serious attention to this, get into it. It is a novel. It is not a lecture series or a technical journal. This is a fun story, but we've gotten so deep into talking about it, we haven't told people where they can find it. Number one, your name is Chad Boles, and you spell that Boles. The title is Blinded Authority. Tell the folks where they can find out more about you and where they can order this book.
You can go to Amazon, and the book is available either in a Kindle ebook version or a paperback, which you can order, have delivered to your home. I will be at the AJC Book Festival Labor Day weekend, and I'm looking forward to that, and you can buy one directly from me there. So Canary Media is the Facebook page and the publisher of the book. Then, of course, you can buy the book on Amazon.
Outstanding. While we're talking about that, say a few words about the cover. It's very distinctive. Talk about your cover.
Thanks for asking. As I'm writing the book, you want to take a break every couple of days, and I thought, well, I got to do a cover. And so, this idea of cracks in our society and cracks in our infrastructure and our municipal financial system cracking under the pressure, I said, hey, let's look for some cracks. And so I got some images of cracked concrete, which us civil engineers love, and gave it to a graphic artist professional, Nathan Matthew, and he just did a wonderful job with it. He came back with a couple of ideas, and I love the first two. And I'm a pretty critical purveyor of that kind of stuff. I want to see the detail, and he just wowed me. And so that's how we came up with the cover.
It is a striking cover, and again, the title that you're looking for is Blinded Authority. Now, this story, is there any political bent intended in this story at all?
There is no Republican, there is no Democrat, there is no race, creed, religion, origin. Everybody's different, but they're all unique as humans. I did not want anybody to get distracted from what many will use to distract.
We love to get reviews. You had one that I want to bring up. I normally don't bring reviews directly in here, but he actually scoffed at the amount of corruption that you portray in this story. Now, do you consider that you took literary license to this, or were you fairly accurate in what goes on in these boardrooms?
Like I said, the book is a string of national headlines connected by hyperbole. Many of the things that happened in the book have happened in one individual municipality, and not just one, but many of them. To put it all in one book, is a little overkill. Maybe. Sure made it a lot of fun to write, though.
Oh, yeah. And of course, like any good fiction novel, the idea is to make it exciting, to make it where you want to.
Not only do I show you the corruption, I show you how it happens. What are the mechanics of corruption?
Listen, how long did it take you to write this book?
I started writing April. I thought I had finished in December of 2016 and was patting myself on the back for writing a book in I guess 8 months, and then handed it to an editor and learned the hard way that I got another year. So I started writing in April of 16, and I finished in November of 17.
Is there a follow-up in mind? Are you working on anything else at this point?
Yeah, and that was not intentional. When you learn that, wow, this is doable, I can do this, then you begin to kind of break outside of your comfort zone or your envelope and say, hey, maybe I could write another one. I've got some ideas for some other ones.
Well, now that the fiction bug has got you, how about a new crime fighter series? Is there one of those in your future?
I had so much fun creating an ending. There is an ending to this book. And many people have said, you know what, that's a little different. I like it because it ended. But there could be some characters that play a role in the next book. Maybe. I'm trying to tease out a few things. We'll see.
All right. Do you speak to groups? There might be civic groups or clubs. Do you have a regular schedule you do? How can folks reach out to you?
Oh, you can find me on Facebook. My name's Chad Boles. You can message me on Facebook.
I mean, are there specific things that you can talk about in a 20, 30-minute presentation?
Certainly, anyone with an opinion can speak at a podium, and that would include me.
You just exposed me.
That's funny.
Well, tell folks again about you and where they can find Blinded Authority.
Yeah, on Amazon, it's Blinded Authority. You can get the Kindle version, or you can get a paperback, or you can come visit me at booth number 534 at the AJC Book Fair, Labor Day weekend. I'll be there all weekend. It'll be great.
Chad, this has been a big pleasure. We thank you so much for coming on and offering this wonderful novel and educational tool that you've got there. And folks, you really need to look into it. Chad, is there anything that we've left out that you want to bring forward before we close down today?
Doug, you have done so much for new authors. I really, really appreciate it. I hope everybody enjoys the book, and I'll see you Friday night, August the 3rd, at the Decatur Library.
Thank you very much. Now, folks, again, the book is Blinded Authority, and the author is Chad Boles. It's out there waiting for you. I want you to get out there and get it, learn something while you're enjoying this tremendous novel. So, I hope you'll look for that, and I hope you'll join us next week. That's it for today. We thank you so much for being there. So until then, for myself, I am Doug Dahlgren. For my guest this hour, Chad Boles. And, of course, for Scott Z, our Z-Man, running the board back up in Ohio. We all say take care of yourselves and each other. Read a book. And I'll see you all again in just 167 hours. Take care now.
We hope you've enjoyed this broadcast of the Doug Dahlgren Show on the Artist First Radio Network. Our theme music is composed by Mr. Wig Nelson. All past shows are available for free downloading. Visit the archive sections at artistfirst.com, and we'll see you next week.